Welcome to the meta. This is season 45 going into 46. So, welcome to the show. For those previous long-term listeners, you could be watching on YouTube or listening to it on a podcast. I'm using a different microphone, so I'm very curious how the audio quality works out compared to in the past. I've frequently had audio issues. Maybe this will be a step towards solving it. Anyway, what is the show? So this show is looking at let me start the background video by Ginger Jesus. Great name, and he's been doing pretty regularly GAC content for a while. He's very good content, entertaining, good guy to watch. Anyway, what is the show? This is the meta, where we look at the GAC and TW, maybe a comment here or there, but primarily this is GAC. Once per season. What's going on, teams, datacron combinations, and really we break this up into like 3v3 with the current datacron combination, 5v5 with the current datacron combination, and ships. Because each season is a brand new datacron combination for 3v3 or 5v5, so it's always new every single season, which is cool. And what is competitive? I've had a few questions about that and have been talking about it recently with the council. We had our first show a few days ago. It's quite good. If you listen to it on the podcast, you'll probably see it. Otherwise, Sanjita has it on his YouTube, but it's on the Discord as well. It's there in podcast form. Anyway, so competitive means people trying to advance into Kyber 1. Like, that's the long-term goal of most competitive players. Like, if you're in Kyber 1, maybe you want to be in the top 100 or top 300 or top 50 or whatever the case may be. But people who are trying to eventually get to Kyber 1 is the definition of competitive for me. It could be in 3 years, you have to build your roster. But if that's the goal, that's what this show is focused on. So, and also now Kyber 1 is going to be bigger again. Like, it should go back to the 10, 20, 30, 2010 model that they were targeting at the beginning. 10, 20, 40, 20, 10, I think, for the different leagues. Anyway, different divisions. So, who am I? Why do you care about my opinion? For most people who have been following for a while, you know who I am. If not, I do play in the top 50 to 100 or something of Kyber 1. Have been for forever. But I think more importantly, from the perspective of this show, I watch an enormous amount of GAC fights to learn, really, and to put content on, to put fights for people, counters on GrandArenaScience.com. But I watch a lot of fights, so I get a lot of perspective that many other people may not have the opportunity to get, and try and share my feedback here. So, it's a podcast. Yeah, as I mentioned, I split it up here into these three competitive states, and then I do talk a bit about the overall game meta and some random thoughts based upon what I'm thinking of for the last month. And I talk about this, blah, blah, blah. In the game meta part, I do talk about sort of other things that are happening, that everything is related to PvP. That's the whole purpose of the show. So things that will make it better or worse or whatever for you, or may impact you in some way, is what I try and focus my perspective on. So let's get into the 3v3, or sort of wrap up. I do have my Meta Moments podcast, which is like every couple of days, 10 minutes or something like that I produce throughout the season, but it's just in podcast form. I may put it in YouTube form as well, but for now, it's just in podcast. We'll see about the YouTube thing. It's just much easier to record a podcast rather than making a YouTube video. Anyway, so I have that, and because of that, I won't really talk so much about the season that passed, because I covered it numerous times from a variety of angles. So I'm going to be focused more on what's coming up. But one of the really interesting things about this last season, this 3v3 season, is really seeing how quick counters can develop. In particular, because this season was just like the season of brand new characters. You had Malicos, you had the Marauder ship, you had Leia, and Leia with Drogon and R2, and etc. One of the challenges there at the beginning of the season was what worked well for a counter. For the first week, there was some things like the Inquisitors, Riva and the Inquisitors were killing it sometimes, GML was killing it sometimes, SLKR was killing it sometimes, but there's no like real highly reliable version. But after the first week, once the data was available on GG, swgh.gg, it became clear that SLKR, Kylo Ren Unmasked, and Malicos was sort of the go-to counter, gave you the highest chance of success. Of course, assuming you had the, best, not best, but like a couple of Datacrons worked pretty well. And you needed sort of a matching defense for their offense, and you needed the right Omicrons on Malicos, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the interesting part too is that happened in like the matter of days. Like once many of the people who pay attention to that started seeing it and using it, some of them being content creators. And the cool part is that all of the people that used it, actually I think, 8 out of the 9 times it was used in week 1 were all members of the guild, the Big Chabowski. So just these few people, I think there's 3 of them, most of them used it twice, 3 or 4 of them in that guild, who used it throughout week 1 and had success with it. There's only 1 or 2 failures, I think. And because of what they did and the fact that if you can go see the data on GG, then it became something used throughout the community and refined, and you see the thresholds a little bit more and stuff like that. But pretty awesome. That to me is one of the coolest parts about this game, where in the space of a month you get to discover something new, steal the new idea from somebody else, and then it becomes popular in the community. Pretty awesome. So what else about this last season? Yeah, as I sort of mentioned a little bit, so many meta-defining new powerful characters, and not just like, Starkiller. Starkiller is an amazing character, but when Starkiller was introduced, I think like for that particular season, there wasn't any other similar characters, and effectively we have 3 Starkillers in one season. Leia, Malicos, and the Marauder ship. Yeah, ships are in a fascinating place now in the meta. Really, really interesting. I'll spend some time talking about them today. I think Marauder has more impact than people seem to have realized, or use at least, if you look at the number of counters that have been fought with that ship. Pretty interesting. So, So anyway, crazy 3v3 season. A lot of fun, very interesting. Ginger Jesus is not having a good time with Leia, and mirrors many people's experiences throughout the season. Not an easy, surprised that Wampa timed out. Not an easy team to beat if you don't know what to use. So what's going to happen in this 5v5 season? So I think there's a lot of variety for Leia to do something, because the teams are going to be strange. So, I think most people is not true. Obviously, everybody is going to use Drogon and R2 as the core 3 with Leia, and then who do you put as the 4th and 5th? We were talking about again on the council, and you can see it in plenty of YouTube videos testing and stuff like that. Han and Chewbacca as the 4th and 5th, quite deadly. The most deadly, I don't know. Is there any real easy? I have a feeling there'll be a counter that's discovered to that. Do I know what the counter is? Absolutely not. And maybe that's going to be sort of like the poison team all season. Or you save your Leia for offense and mirror it, but you really don't have mirror chances are, It's not terrible in a mirror. It helps if your Han goes first, obviously. But you don't need to go first. And you're always going to be smarter. Well, hopefully you'll be smarter than the AI, especially with like timing alt and stuff like that. But anyway, but also somebody mentioned to me in a DM, I don't know if you want to have your name used. Do you know who you are? I'm happy to use your name if you want. But anyway, with the possibility of using Princess Leia with her Omicron in the team, and that's quite interesting. Like, there's a lot of fascinating tech in 5v5 that you could potentially use to make the Leia teams interesting, especially if Han Chewie ends up being the most popular one, you know? Especially once that's sort of figured out. What will people use instead of that, expecting people will have that counter available. To me, this is a big part of what the fascinating aspect of GAC is, sort of setting your board or keeping for offense things that will beat the teams that people are expecting to use against what you would normally place. And if you do take out Han and Chewbacca, then what's going on with the CLS team? Like, the CLS team is sort of neutered. So a possibility exists for gas to become more powerful on defense, because normally CLS takes out gas. But gas is really good on offense and cleanup, especially against these, like, quite a few teams that are so deadly now. The no revive thing is quite powerful. Gas can work against some Ray teams, because Ray teams are going to be another interesting one, like with Visas primarily, Visas level 9, where anytime a unit dies, or anytime an UFU dies, I think. I forget, to be honest. Either way, a light side unit dies, she takes a bonus turn. So if you put her in a Ray timeout team, especially if you make her super, super slow, so JMK can't do the instant annihilate, or it takes him a while to do the instant annihilate, with Tano, with Cat, that's an interesting team. And then even if you kill Visas, like, you're probably going to time out even if you use JMK. Not probably, but you have a decent likelihood. And there's lots of options on what you put in there with JMK. I mean, with Ray. Ray Ben, obviously, Ray Ben Visas. And then Cal, I guess. But if you put Cal, you're giving up Cal from the Malicos team. And the Malicos team is very good. Probably one of the better teams, actually, to beat the Ray timeout team if you use Seer Malicos on offense. Really, there's so many different possibilities to use. You could even put Chewbacca in the Ray team for Dispel, Blinds. Like, you don't really, he's not a rebel leader, so he's not sharing his stats. But he also gets res when other units res. He does the AoE Dispel and Blind, I just said. Quite good. Or he goes with Mon Mothma, maybe, Mon Mothma, Pow, Hoth Rebel, Scout, Wedge with the level 9 Wedgeacron. My goodness, that is a huge amount of damage. And then throw in Chupio in there too. Rebel Leader, stat sharing. And it frees up C-3PO. C-3PO can go with the Ewok team with Nisa. Oof. Like, there's going to be some crazy teams. Crazy, crazy teams. And the UFU part I think the UFU part is going to be one of the most interesting ones. Like, depending on what you're assuming your opponent will set, the first week is going to be a disaster. An extra special disaster. Depending on what your opponent sets, like, if you want the best Malicos team, you need Cal. That means Cal can't go in the Ray team on defense. And if you're expecting your opponent to put, like, a really beefy Ray team on defense, you're going to want to keep probably Malicos to beat it, I think. Because I don't think SLKR Malicos crew is going to beat the full 5-man Ray team. Just the other ads that you can bring along with SLKR are not that beefy. And Malicos doesn't really give bonuses to non-UFU. Yeah, I don't think that's going to work as well in fives, but I could definitely be wrong. I mean, throw in Watt and armor in there maybe. I think Watt will probably be destroyed with the bonus turns. Well, most likely most Drogons are going to be faster than most Watts. So both Han and Drogon will move first, and Watt will probably be dead before taking a turn. But on the other hand, if he's the one that dies instead of Malicos or Crew or Armorer, if you get 3 stacks from Armorer on SLKR, that's great. The downside is if SLKR has his protection disabled by Leia, then I guess you don't get crit, but still. Anyway, that's going to be interesting. Going to be really, really interesting. And so many other people now have Jedi Knight Cal, which, again, it's like Malgus rather, is going to be an offensive tool. Yeah, tons of fascinating stuff here on this 5v5 season. Talking here about Rey. I'm not really reading my notes. I mean, I know what I wrote. I'm following where my brain is taking me here as we're going through it. Yeah, I think the Rey teams are going to be some timeout Rey teams. On the other hand, Starkiller in fives with Riposte is quite good. And it's very possible that just takes out everything anyway. Because once you get shock everywhere, you're not going to allow Visas to heal, and she needs to be at full health if she's going to resurrect somebody. So it's going to be some beefy teams. You need a really strong Riposte Datacron, but Starkiller still may do it. But I think Riposte is required if you want Starkiller to do it. I don't see any other way. That's going to be really interesting. Here I'm talking about Malicos, the buff heavy comp we're just going over. Yeah, gas is very interesting too. If you put gas, I mean, probably damage reduction is better just because it's so much safer, because it works now against Rey and stuff like that. Malgus, the Jedi set 10 damage reduction. But if you have the clone stacking one against Rey with all of those buffs, my goodness, there's going to be a huge amount of extra damage for the clones. And if they're stacking already, that may actually be like one of the more technical counters. That counter in general is tough, and it's very comp dependent. But if you have a good fast Rex, and probably if there's a pre-taunt, that would stop the gas counter, because you only have the one dispel. Well, you have 2 dispels really with Arc Trooper in there. Anyway, that's going to be a fascinating assumption. I think R8, Risen Zero Finn is the one that usually slows down or stops the gas teams. But if you're putting Visas, it's sort of instead of Risen Zero Finn. I think that's sort of how it works. And really I was hoping last season to see some of Cody and his endless stacking. If you put Cody in the 501st, you essentially have, and Cody takes a turn, you have an endless stacking team. TM loop, endless damage stacking. But what do you kill with it? And you have to give up gas 501st, which is probably going to be better in most situations. You can't kill. What GLs do you kill? You could kill SLKR only if no Hux. That's not going to happen. You cannot kill Rey because of damage immunity. She'll go into ult and then probably kill you because all the TM you gained. You can't kill Jabba because there's no assists and you'd be dead before that came about. You can't kill Lord Vader because, crits under 80%. You can't kill, you could kill JML probably, even if he has no crits, you have some dispels there. But who puts JML on defense? You can't kill Rey, I don't think, because she limits the TM gains to once per unit. Oh, you're right. Your units would be dead with Drogon and probably Hound's bonus turn, so that's sort of like a no-go in the first place. You might be able to kill C if there's no Malak in there. Who put C with no Malak? Nobody. Yeah, so awesome team. I just think it's missing a target. Very disappointing. I was very excited about that team. Yeah, so it's going to be a horrible mess of a glorious, horrible, fantastic, depending on your perspective, mess of a first week. I think there's going to be a lot of people who put a bunch of stuff on defense and see what happens. It makes me sort of cringe because I like being offensive more than defensive. But we'll see. I might do the defense thing too. No, stay offense again. Let's talk about ships though. Ships are amazing. So you can read this if you want, pause or read. I'm going to repeat a lot of what's in there, but not everything. So it comes down to Leviathan. And there's basically 2 Leviathan comps. Dagger starting or Sith Fighter starting. Historically, whatever. I would say common knowledge maybe. Again, really depends on what your definition of common knowledge is. For a while, at the beginning, whatever. If you start Sith Fighter, especially if yours is higher relic, the thought was you would make the mirrors more complicated. You couldn't mirror so well. That's not true. That's definitely not true. You can play the Leviathan with a slower Sith Fighter. It's still just a coin flip at the beginning, even if your Leviathan moves second. And even if your Sith Fighter is lower relic, the win rate is still something like 70-80% mirrors. And it can get much higher, like 90%. There's not a ton of RNG in there, you just have to play well. And if you have a Sith Fighter starting, the Chimera counter is also like 80 to 90%. However, if you have Dagger starting, you're giving the Sith Fighter mirrors like a 90 to 95% win rate. But you're making the Chimera mirrors, the Chimera battles like 50% win rate. So if you just look at it numbers wise, best to keep your Leviathan for offense. If you're looking just at the Leviathan counter, best to keep your Leviathan for offense. You can probably one-shot it. Okay, so let's say you do that. What do you put on defense then? Let's say you put Executor Triple Attacker. Well, your opponent probably will have a Profundity and that can kill it very easily. Or it will have Negotiator with Marauder, which also kills it very easily. Okay. Or it has also Chimera. Without the Leviathan target, Chimera kills Profundity very, very easily. Well, actually, it's more like Executrix is a better option, but let's say Empire. Okay, so let's say you put Profundity and Executor. So if you put Triple Attacker Executor, well, there you go again. You have like a 90, I think maybe 95%, not a ton of fights, 50 or 60 or something, but 95% win rate with Negotiator and Marauder again. Or you have Profundity that can kill Triple Attacker too. And if you don't put Triple Attacker, you do the traditional lineup, then you're going to have your First Order Finalizer kill it. So as attractive as it may be to put or to keep Leviathan for offense, I think you make the offense, unless your opponent like mirrors you and you put Executor, they would have to put Negotiator with Marauder on defense, which is not bad. I mean, it's actually pretty decent, but there's still plenty of counters that beat it. It just sort of shuts off the Malevolence counter. But if your opponent puts Negotiator with Marauder, Leviathan, Profundity, and Executor Triple Attacker on defense, and you do the same thing, you will both have like some not so great options to clear. But if your opponent does the more traditional like Executor Triple Attacker and Leviathan on defense, you will actually have worse options if you keep your Leviathan for offense, or they will have easier options to one-shot your defense. So yeah, but it's I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong. it's either you plan for your opponent to do a very specific thing and then you give yourself a higher win rate percentage, or you make it difficult for most opponents to score well against your fleets, but then you're potentially setting yourself up for disaster and not even being able to clear fleets, depending on what they set. So, yeah, man, I just think it's so fascinating. The point of this is don't sleep on Marauder with Negotiator. Make sure you're using it in the right spot. A lot of people seem to be using it, like this is the funniest thing. They use it against the Malevolence. Terrible choice. It has a worse win rate than the traditional counter that everybody's used for more than a year, the Negotiator counter. So, I mean, choose your fight carefully. Just because it's fun and new doesn't mean it actually is better. But man, it's great against both Executor and the Profundity, not so amazing. You can also do okay against Leviathan, but only against the Dagger lineup. I don't say only, but primarily against the Dagger lineup is where Negotiator with Marauder works well. And even then, it's not 100%. You have to have your speed set, just so and stuff like that. But yeah, amazing. And you can beat Leviathan even if they go first, and even if you don't have the faster Sith fighter, you can still beat it like 80-90%. So, what are you going to do on yours? I think I'll probably leave mine in, which is not either one of these lineups, but it's similar to the fleet lineups I've been using for a while. And it does some decent banner stripping. I can clear fleets, like even if I screw up really badly, I have like numerous options to kill any possible combination of fleets. That's like my style in general. Maybe not the best banners, but definitely some margin for error there. Yeah, so I go into some more details around the triple attacker here and Negotiator with Marauder. Yeah, a really fascinating setup with ships. I feel this is like the most interesting ships meta we've had in a long time. There's no like one unbeatable fleet. Leviathan is obviously the strongest, but you have the Chimera counter, which is very good against the Sith fighter lineup and 50-50 sort of against the TIE Dagger starting. And then you have the Negotiator and Marauder, which is probably like 60-70% against the TIE Dagger starting. Depends on relic levels. Really depends on relic levels, because there's some damage thresholds that you sort of need to meet. And then mirrors, which are 90%, which is quite good. I mean, it's great that you can get a good mirror RNG. Yeah, fascinating ship situation. So that's what I have to say about fleets. Now let's move on to the game state meta, and I'm very interested to talk about this. So the game state meta overall, I think, is quite good. Balance-wise, I mean, like in terms of the new units and their abilities, yes, Leia is very strong, but very beatable in threes. I mean, there's the one team that can one-shot her, but there's a number of other teams that can one-shot her sometimes. Mirrors are, they're not bad. I think SOKR, Malicos, KRU is still better in threes, and we'll see about fives. I really don't know about fives. It's also hard to test in an arena because Malicos' Omicrons aren't activated. Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. But I even like the Han Chewbacca option, I think there's going to be counters that'll come out that are reliable. 5 just has so much flexibility. You can do so much stuff, and there's so many units that are available since there's like fewer teams altogether that are used. So PvP balance I think is pretty good. Datacron sets have been good. Some strong, but no really stupid overpowered ones like the Empire set 4 with cooldowns and dodge. So pretty happy with that. The squish fix, I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. That's very nice. I mean, overall, it's more crystals in the economy. The raid reward system is quite good. We'll see if there's anything new with Endor, or just like more currency. The new system with the Endor raid, I'm curious to learn more about. I always like something new, so I'm certainly give it a shot. I really liked the game dynamics wise. The Crate Dragon raid was pretty awesome. Like fun dynamics, decent. Well, actually, I would say like very little RNG. There's definitely some, but most of the 5 comps, if you're looking for a max score, you can remove almost all of the RNG by either knowing how to play around it, or just modding your characters a very specific way, which is quite nice. Like I like that. Once you set your modding, you use the same modding each time, and you're pretty much set. But I'm very curious. I have no clue how it's going to be with the Endor raid. That's a big question mark for me. So we'll see. I'm curious. Rewards are great. Besides that, PvE wise, I think one of the, let's go a little bit. I'm trying to find my notes here. So I think there's going to be something new coming, because if you look at it from a reward perspective, GAC rewards are great. The crystals are excellent, and mostly from winning fights. Who cares whether if you're in Kyber versus Kyber 5 versus Kyber 1? Yes, there's definitely a crystal difference, but mostly the difference is from winning the fights. And you still, in Kyber 5, you get a lot of crystals from winning the fights. Kyber 1's better, but the crystal income is the main thing. It's quite good in GAC. As I mentioned, the non-PvP rewards are good. TW, I don't really think the reward for your time spent is there. As a participant, it's not bad. You do 10, 15 battles depending on when you're available, cleanups or no cleanups, whatever. But there's no real. Anyway, I'm not here to bitch about TW. That's a whole nother subject. But the rewards are primarily end-game related. R9 materials. Frankly, most players have an excess of R9 materials because it's not the droid brains that they need. It's everything else, that they have a shortage of. The reroll materials are fantastic for everybody. The Mark III ones, it's the only place to get them for free. So they're really good. But still, for the amount of time you have to spend, if you want to be really good, it's not even you, it's your entire guild. Some system where you get TW points and can spend them how you like would probably be a lot better received, similar to how GAC is. You get the GAC currency and you spend it however you want on whatever gear you like. Anyway, I think there'll be a TW rework. I hope there'll be a TW rework. Or some new PvP game mode. Just PvP is... GAC is fun and I really enjoy it. But I would like to have something that's a little more... some new PvP mode I'd love to have. But I don't think it's going to happen this year. This year is Endor Raid for sure. Maybe next year, March, April, May, something like that. Second quarter, I suspect, we might get a new or reworked PvP mode. I think balance-wise, TW is fine. It's just the overhead and management required to perform at a high level in TW is very, very time-consuming. And time management is actually what I want to spend a little bit of time talking about. And we're getting to the end of the video. Perfect. So, this game is all about time management if you want to do well. It's about resource management. But to make the most out of the resources, either you spend time on making sure you're getting the most free resources, or you spend money so you don't have to spend time. But spending money comes from how you spend your time to make the money. So in the end, it's just like life, how it's what you do at the time you have. And well, this game is what you do with the time you have. And yes, I'm ignoring that some parts of this game, like not all, but the vast majority of mobile games, or at least the ones that aren't trying to get you to spend money, they're designed specifically to making you feel like you're missing out, or you need to spend to stay caught up or something like that, which is not really true at all. You can be a free-to-play player and effectively get everything that somebody who does spend money is getting. And I have some little case studies to go through here to try and show what I mean. But basically, in this game, putting aside the time management, there's two things you can do with your time that will give you a advantage or reward. One of them is the planning, like how you plan your roster upgrades, your farming, your mods, your datacrons, all of that. And then actually how you execute. And executing is taking your characters and create Dragon Raid. I guarantee you there are 10 times more people with characters who could theoretically get a certain score in the Create Dragon Raid, but aren't because they don't know how to mod, they don't spend the time to learn, they don't know how. Just a lack of execution, not maximizing their rewards. And similarly, it could be in GAC, you maybe have an amazing roster in GAC, but you don't have time to play, time to know the counters, time to research the counters, time to set a good whatever, the actual execution part is lacking, and you're not making the most out of it. This is everybody, you can't be, there's no perfect at this game by any stretch of the imagination. So basically what I'm saying is with your available time, you have planning and execution to affect your rewards. And if we focus just on GAC, there's different ways to play GAC depending on the available time you have, and everybody's going to have a different amount of time, because let's assume that most competitive players, they're going to do their, they'll do their TB, they'll do conquest, they'll do their territory war, they'll do all their farming. Like, there's a lot of stuff in the game to take up your time. One of the reasons I'm looking forward to the indoor raid once per week, that would be great. But things have gotten better recently. Conquest simming is fantastic. Really, that's taken the time it takes me to play Conquest down by probably 2/3. Instead of an hour a day, it's 20 minutes a day. Really, not even that. No, about 20 minutes a day, I guess, is probably accurate. For the first week, and then once I'm down to just a few feats whatever they're called, I forgot what they're called, to get, the red crate, which is where I'm at now. There's a few that I have to finish off. And that just takes a few minutes, 10 battles a day or something like that, 1 minute each maybe. So pretty fast. Anyway, doing all of this like regular things to make the most out of your free resources takes time. So then, assuming you're watching this because you want to do well at GAC or you like GAC, what do you do with your remaining time? By the way, Ginger Jesus, I'm leaving you here with your magnificent beard, and we're going to move on to some other screens here in a moment. So, in my mind, if you're trying to figure out how you spend your time most effectively in GAC, you need to understand what motivates you. And we had a really interesting discussion. I'm bringing up the council again. I really enjoyed that. That was very interesting. I really like everybody who's on the show with me. Different perspective, different way of playing the game. Educational for me and fun to chat with them. Anyway, why do you compete? Because we talked about this a little bit, like motivations. Why are you wanting to make improvements in GAC, for instance? Do you want more rewards? Do you like the competition? Do you like the fighting? Do you want to just make the most out of what you have? Do you have extra time? You want to make your Star Wars characters more cool? I don't know. Everybody has a different thing. And personally, I'll just say personally for me, I do it because yeah, I want to make the most out of my free rewards, and honestly, I like the combat system in this game more than anything else. I mean, that's what drew me to this game in the first place. I like the way you can develop your characters and make choices during combat to perform better than other people, I guess, or better than others. That's the competition to me. Honestly, competition is much less, for me in this game, is much less about like beating somebody in GAC, but more that knowing that we both had X, and with my X, I did X plus 10, and they did X plus 9 or something. I feel that's where I get a lot of sense of accomplishment, you know. So yeah, part of the time, going back to the time management aspect, which is what I was starting out with here, is, you know, once they figured out what motivated them, that largely influences how they play the game or what they're doing. You know, like Van Seal, for instance, he plays GAC with minimal time required, doesn't even have very many. He was saying he didn't have a GAC Omicron applied in like a year and a half or something like that, which is just insane. But we'll take a look. Like, he's still in Kyber 1, does great. I think the most common thing that everybody had in common, they are making the most of the free resources. They always do their conquest, their TB, everybody does TW. If you're at a certain level, just because even if you lose, the rewards are fine. So you always do what you can to get the free stuff, but then how they actually play GAC is very different, and you can do well in all of these different play styles. Just depends on what you want, what you enjoy, what you get value out of, what you find fun. So yeah, reward for TW. So yes, I think there is basically, these are my 3 generalizations. People who have been watching the show for a while are going to recognize them. I don't think this has changed since the beginning of GAC. It obviously has different variables now that we're in the Datacron era, and it changes every single season. Like what is good changes every single season. But like the play style, the general play style, I think is more or less the same, or that can be blocked into 3 separate areas. So and I'm sorting these, by the way, in amount of time that I think it takes people. Like, I'm sure you'll categorize yourself in one of these to some, or maybe all 3 a little bit, you know, depending on what your available time is, or what you're doing, you know, what you have availability for. But I'm sorting these by amount of time it takes to execute them well. So number 1 is tryhards. Not really tryhards. Like, I would say these are generally the best players in GAC, the ones who are consistently in the top 50. And these are players who are just flexible. Like, if their opponent is a heavy defense player, they will also put a heavy defense and make it tough, and they'll have better knowledge of like off-tier counters. They'll make more with less in general, and spend more time planning ahead of time, making sure their mods for certain counters or teams are just so, or they'll build a team to stop the 3 most common counters, for example. Or they spend a lot on, you know, optimizing their datacrons, or any combination of, or a combination of all 3 of these things. I think especially too, not only is it people that are in the top of Kyber 1, but as your roster size reduces, if you want to compete above, you know, your roster size, especially if you're sort of missing a key unit, like if you don't have Leia and all of your opponents have Leia, then you absolutely have to be a little more creative and clever in both your defense and your offense, and your planning to match players who may be of similar skill level to you. My notes here are sort of funny to myself as I read them afterwards. So that's number 1, like people who really take it seriously and have time to spend planning for each match. Number 2 is essentially offensive players who are aiming for full clear. So this gives you a little bit more spare time because your defense matters less. Not that it doesn't matter. I think for offense players, the best way for many offense players to improve is to make a tricky defense, because really your offense is sort of set, I guess. You know you're always going to have X amount of teams for offense, because that's what it's going to take to clear 99% of players' defense. Now, obviously, it's more complicated if you're hitting up, if your opponent has one or two units that you don't have, like key meta units I'm talking about, like Leia and Leviathan at 7 stars or something like that. But in general, offense, I would consider myself an offense player, is less time than like if you plan for every single match, or you don't have to plan offense and defense for every single match, or not as much, I guess. And I think it fares better over a wider variety of opponents because you mostly care about half of the game, half of GAC. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but that's how I look at it. And probably the best sort of bang for your buck, or the most reward for the time spent, like you can spend the least amount of time here and still do well, is a very heavy defensive player. So, I don't know, all GLs on defense, the FU defense. You do have to have a bit of knowledge about the off-tier counters, but like honestly, oftentimes these players, especially as you drop further in Kyber, even further in Kyber 1, your opponent may not even be able to clear a single wall. And so if you can clear just one wall, you'll win, and you have to do a half or a quarter or a third of the fights that your opponent's doing. So you save yourself a huge amount of time. You still get the crystals for winning the match. And I think this particular play style can lend itself very well to, as you advance further in Kyber, if you have the time to spend on refining your defense and getting even better at the off-tier counters, this can lend itself to building a very good offensive focused, or not offense, but highly performing roster, account, positioning, etc. The only sort of downside in my mind of this is that most of the defense heavy players will get decimated by an offense player, and offense players they don't keep all of their GLs for offense usually, especially now in this meta, and they're not going to be great at clearing cleanly, I guess. So we'll see some of that when we look at my my GAC history and other people's GAC history here. So there's a downside, if you're defense focused and you focus mostly on off tier and you don't expect to clear every time, offensive player who comes in and expects to clear every time oftentimes will be able to and will beat you. But most players are I think most players are a combination of defense and trying to try hard. I don't think there's a lot of very offense heavy players. I could be wrong. I think there's more and more, but I still think defense is the most popular play style just because of time. People don't have time to do something else. So easier, put your heavy teams on defense and force your opponent to try and clear you or make more points than you. So what is the best for you? So I do think I'm assuming everybody thinks about this on a regular basis, or they thought about it and they decided what they like and then they go with that. But the components that are part of this, at least for me, is the frequency of roster adjustments. Myself, I change my defense 99% of the time, once per week. But I change my defense every week. So if somebody, effectively, I make my defense a puzzle. And I believe very, 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 very strongly in this. And I believe hardly anybody does this and they're missing out. Or it's an extremely effective way to play. I do credit many of my wins to this element alone. So I effectively try and place a defense that it's a puzzle. Each week it's a puzzle. The downside of this is if two opponents are in the same guild and they talk about it and share my defense, then I might lose the second match. But I don't worry about that too much, honestly. I don't mind if that's the case. Even if somebody knows my defense, there shouldn't be an easy solution. So essentially, I set defense where it is either extremely unlikely, just from an RNG, like 50% win rate type of thing, for someone to be able to one-shot my entire board, or if they choose to one-shot my front wall, they will be leaving themselves open to a prevention of clear in the back wall. Again, everything is all RNG based. Somebody could succeed on a 20% counter because they got all the crits or lots of resists or something like that. So this is not like a foolproof thing. But with this puzzle that I create once a week, it takes me about, I would say, an hour every week to do this. I also make sure that it's different every week. And this is where I feel that I am giving myself an advantage over players who do scout carefully if they're looking at and trying to figure out my defense. If they scout for the last week, they'll see I set the same defense every day that week, and they might assume I'll do the same thing. Every single week when I set a defense, I set something that is different than the week before in some significant regard. And sometimes I'll do nothing in the front wall and I change every team in the back wall. Or I'll add another GL to the front wall and take away all the GLs in the back wall. So people fail again. There's a lot of little things you can do that for players who scout, which are generally tend to be the more, I'll say, good players or people who want to be good, you give yourself an advantage and make them double or triple think themselves and give yourself a bit of a leg up, which is, again, it's like an hour a week, very low effort. I don't really scout my opponents until the day that I fight them, or the day before. I'll look and see what their datacrons are, but generally all the opponents I fight have a similar roster to me, at least in terms of units. My mods usually tend to be better than most opponents in volume, not in quality maybe, but yeah, so that's roster adjustment frequency. Defense traps, that's what I was talking about. Or if you plan per opponent, you can do it, but I really love the weekly trap thing. Much less time, doesn't really change anything for people who don't scout, and gives you a big advantage over people who do scout, because they know either they're a mediocre scouter and they'll be fooled, or they're a really good scouter and they'll realize that they can't really depend on anything, in which case it's a wash for you. You're getting an advantage either way. When you can attack, that definitely makes a difference. Your attack process, what resources you have available for help. These last two things, man, I'm already at 53 minutes. Jiminy Christmas. This is way longer than I thought it'd be. Anyway, this is an important part, and then we'll go do a little roster review, and then, yeah. Not roster review, what am I talking about? I want to look at some matches and do a comparison, and to show you the different play styles and how it works out. So, I think that my win rate in general is probably 65% or something. I generally am a 6-3 player. Half my matches are 6-3, the other half are 5-4. I don't think I've had a losing season in a long time. So I lose plenty of matches, right? But I think that the vast majority of them, I'm sure there's been some in the last, did I last season? I think I may have been beaten last season. So in my mind, I can lose or I can be beaten. If I lose, I made a mistake. I chose the wrong team. I misplayed mechanically in the fight. I got tilted and just threw shit at a team. Whatever the case may be, I personally lost the fight. Being beaten is where somebody set a better trap or a better defensive board than I did, or their datacrons are just I cannot beat those datacrons with the datacrons that I have, or they did some very, very specific modding to do something that I wasn't expecting or I didn't check. But I am rarely beaten. I lose plenty of times, but most of the time I lose and I know exactly why I lost. Like I can look at that particular fight, that particular match, that decision, and say, this is where I lost the fight. Of course, the opponent beat me. Like I'm not trying to take credit away from them or not say that they play better. Like for sure they play better when I am beaten or when I lose. But I think like the important part to take away is what you learn from it. Like when you lose, hopefully it's immediately clear what you did to lose that fight, and that those losses, generally from my perspective, are easier lessons to learn. Like immediately I'll make a note in my spreadsheet. Like okay, this is what I screwed up on. Don't do that again. I sometimes do it again. Because whatever, I'm in a rush or I forget or something like that. Like it's not a foolproof method, but at least I know what it was that caused me to lose. Being beaten, on the other hand, like that is more of a bit of a hit to the pride, to some level. And I think you can learn more valuable lessons that way, but it can oftentimes be harder to find out what they are. Like maybe you don't even know, like, wow, how did he have this set up a certain way? And in that regards, I think it's so helpful to like chat with your opponent, talk with them. Could be in Discord, could be in game, whatever, congratulate them for sure if they really beat you. Or if you just lost, it's nice to give them congratulations. I'm not great at that, but I don't know, I hate the in-game chat system. If I know somebody's information on Discord, I'll always reach out to them and say thanks for the match and stuff, whether I win or lose. But some people don't like talking after they've lost. Anyway, make sure you're always learning. That's the most important part. So you hopefully don't do the same thing again, or you learn something new that you can use against other opponents. So I want to look at a little bit, 57 minutes. It's going to be a long one. So these are all the members of the council. It's myself, Tasnex, Van Seal, Sanjita, and Callan Awesome, who goes by SB Crumbs t-shirts, or SB Crumb shirts, because of his amazing Hawaiian shirts. So we're all in Kyber 1. We all have vastly different playstyles. I would say I'll look at the highest GPs here, Tasnex and myself. He is 13.5 million, and I'm almost 13 million. Skill rating, he's probably like position 30 and I'm 35 or something like that when the season updates. Last season I was, this is Tasnex. Last season he was about the same as he is now. And the season before, that's when he was up to number 2, I think. And myself, last season I was almost identical. The season before I was a bit lower, but in general, I often end up seasons in the 30s or something like that, 20s, 30s. It's very common for me. So roster-wise, I think we're almost identical in this top section. I have a few more Zetas and a few more Omicrons, but effectively that's it. Now let's go down and look at the bottom section. Offensive battles 1. I'm an offensive player, so 6,200. Similar. Legacy banners earned. This doesn't really mean much anymore. Just I was an offensive player in the old system. He was more defensive. Promotions. I had 88. He had 69. Undersize 1. He had 1,500. I have a lot more. Full rounds cleared. I have 400. Yeah, I have like 25% more. Defends. He has 2,000. I have way less. 20% less. So you can definitely see the difference in play style and amount of time. Like he's a very, I don't want to say try hard. I don't mean this in an offensive way, but every match he prepares quite a lot, and he has a bigger roster than me. I mean, effectively sort of the same. He just like probably a bigger high end, but same skill rating. Not really that big of a difference. Let's look at mods actually. I think there we'll see an even difference. So this is Tassinix mods. Sort by secondary speed. Scroll down to the bottom of the first page. Wow, 20 speed is at the bottom of the first page. His lowest is still 20 speed. Dang. Let's see what mine is. Definitely not that. It's probably like 15 or 16 or something. Sort, secondary speed. We have effectively the same amount of mods, right? He has 1528, I have 1530. Yeah, because you don't want to be capped. Anyway, let's go down. 16 speed. So you can see that he's like drastically better mods. 4 speed different. Wow, that's crazy. Anyway, drastically better mods than me. 500,000 more GP. With our different play styles that we're good at, that we enjoy, still roughly the same skill level. At least now, I mean, or in the past few months. Past when he was really going like crazy. He was all the way up number 2, I think. I've been number 2 before. I think back around season Datacron set 4, I believe. 3 or 4. Anyway, let's look at some other players who are very similar. So this is Calvin Awesome and Sunjita. Calvin Awesome is at 36-35. Sunjita's 100 points ahead. Okay. Let's see. Omicron's 30. Zeta's 254. Calvin has a bit more Zetas. Effectively the same. Well, Sunjita actually has quite a bit more Gear 13s. 20 more Gear 13s. That makes a difference. Their GP, I think, is similar. Calvin is 10 million. Or almost 11. Sunjita is a little over 11, so a little bit different there. Let's look at their sort of play style. So promotions, well, offensive battles, Calvin is 56. Sunjita is 58, very similar, okay. Promotions for Sunjita is 90. For Calvin, or 91, 90, very similar. Undersize. Oh, Calvin is very similar to my undersized. I'm going back to my profile. Scroll through the mods. My undersize. 2188. Calvin's is 2125. Huh, okay. How about Sunjita? 1831. Okay. Less undersized. Lifetime championship score. Calvin's definitely more offensive focused then, by that we can see, or historically was. Full rounds, interesting. Full rounds, Calvin's at 379. 20 more, almost, is Sunjita, okay. Defends, Sunjita has 1266. Calvin has 1920. Wow, it's like, I would say Calvin has gotten much better at defense. And Sunjita's going more for full clears. With a little bit of a bigger roster, probably makes it a bit easier. Interesting, okay. Let's look at mods now. Not there, nope. Mods, sort by speed secondaries. What does the bottom of his mods look like? 15 speed, that's funny, one less than me. That's funny, actually. Honestly, though, I'm quite happy with my mods. I have a huge amount of 6E mods, more than almost anybody. I mean, there's, I'm sure, 30, 40 people with more 6E mods than me, but I have quite a lot. So Sunjita, what's his? 14 speed versus Calvin's 15 speed, so a little bit worse. Can you count 6E? Is that in the profile? 6E mods. Not in there. Anyway, very interesting to see both of them. Sunjita is a bit higher. The roster is similar, but you can see there's a shift in play style. Let's lastly, I'm not really comparing Van Seal to anybody. You can see he has sort of similar Zetas to. Let's go back at Tassinix or myself. he has similar zetas to Tasnex. His GP is 12 million, so $1.5 million lower. His Kyber rank is, or his skill rating is 36.99, which is a bit higher than Calvin, a bit lower than Sanjita, like right in the middle there. All his Omicrons effectively are on TW characters, which is so impressive. He's a very heavy defense player. What is his play style? Offensive battles 1, 4,000 compared to 5,000 and Calvin's 5,000. So quite a few less offensive battles, you can see. Very defensive historically. Undersized, like half of other people, very, very little. Full rounds cleared, 167. Yeah, like he never fulls cleared anything. Wow, that's crazy. Amazing. 1711 defends. I'm looking at Tasnex. His defends are 2008, so he has a lot. He's a heavy defensive player. Defends 1611. So he has more defends than me, not as many as Tasnex. Definitely more than Sanjita, but Calvin, I'm very impressed at Calvin's defense, actually. That's much higher than I would have expected. Anyway, as you can see here, very different play styles. And we're all in Kyber 1. We have different amount of time, enjoyment we get from different things, but we still participate. Found some that worked for us, and still doing just fine. Like, until there's actually a reason, this is my just personal perspective, until there's a reason to be number one, besides, pride, that's a big one, of course, and feeling good about it and the sense of accomplishment. But until there's a reason to be number one, like, find something that works for you. Right now, number one, there's not even a title. I mean, I would try and chase number one for a title, but that's about it. Or some really cool rewards or something. But anyway, so yeah, I found that interesting. I'm not going to review matches. I'm already well over an hour here. Let's close this off, finish it up. So I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, what's coming after Endor? What's the next change? Do we have a new, relic level, a new character level, level 90 or something like that? A new game mode? Something else is coming. Very curious. Squish changes, that's very nice. They said it'd take a few months for everything to sort of even out. We'll see, like, week by week. That's when they adjust the sizes of the different divisions and leagues and stuff. But overall, it should just mean more crystals for more people, which is cool. Yeah, that'll be great. I see no downside, really. And that's all I've got. If you actually listened to an hour and 10 minutes of me talking, well, wow. If you watched it, even more wow. And I hope this mic turned out well and I don't have to re-record the entire thing. So, cheers. And if you really listened this far, go watch AP Gain's video and help that guy out if you have the opportunity or availability. Life can suck for some of us, so help when you can. Cheers. Good luck with your upcoming GAC.